I'm Antonia Castillo. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a photography student in New York City. And I'm also Filipino American.
I'm in Lawson. My pronouns are she, her. I'm a photography student in London, and I am half Indian and half English.
My name is Mengqian Chang. I'm a photography student studying in New York City, but I was born in China and then moved to Singapore when I was 14. Oh, my pronouns is she, her.
So the person that I brought is this one here, and her name is Shadi Gadirian, and she's an Iranian photographer. And in the photo that I've got is from, I think, her Qatar series, where she's basically dressed up women in specific clothing from like a specific time in Iran, where it was like a specific like tribe that was ruling Iran at the time, and then she's kind of like put so in the series she's put different like objects. So in some of them she's got like a Hoover, or in this one she's got a stereo box. Just to kind of contradict with the like ancient dress and then the like more modern stuff, because she basically focuses a lot on like challenging the way women are viewed in Iran, basically. So I think the reason that I've always liked her work is just because I feel like she kind of like looks at similar things that I'm interested in. So I'm quite interested in women and looking at my own Indian heritage and kind of trying to focus on like the traditions, but then also trying to bring in like the newer and more contemporary like views on women, if that makes sense.
So my artist that I wanted to talk about was Katie Benito. They're Filipinx American as well. And this kind of piece that they worked on specifically has like been really inspiring and continuing my practice further on. Here it's called Entries to Faustina, and it's essentially like a pegboard with a bunch of different like items that kind of tell the story of their family's migration to America. So they have like Philippine dried mango, sandals, and then like photographs of their family members and like letters and stuff. So it really is just like a mishmash of different items that kind of mean something to them and tell that story of migration. And I'm really just interested in the idea of like creating an archive to tell your own story and using pictures, words, whatever, to kind of illustrate your identity. Because I feel like as someone who kind of grew up outside of a culture that you like grew up in America but has family members from a different culture, it's hard to have that connection with your family members when they know and have an upbringing that's different than yours. So this is like a very therapeutic kind of art practice that I'm very like interested in, and I want to kind of have that take my practice in terms of like exploring my own identity, because there's like a lot of loss in how I actually see myself as a Filipino American, because I have different upbringing than my family members.
Yeah, I can relate to that because I've grown up in the UK, but then I'm also half English and then half Indian. So with like my Indian side, I just don't really feel like there is a strong connection, I guess, or it's just different because they're like all completely Indian, whereas my family is half and half, so it's a little bit more difficult to try, and that's why I use it. Like in your work, I use my work to kind of connect myself to that Indian side.
Yeah, because there's that loss in your own like identity and personality.
The artist I'm looking at is a Chinese artist from Shanghai, China. Her name is Pixie Liao, and I'm especially inspired by her project called Experimental Relationship. I think I relate to her a lot about her background. She's from China, but like she's making photography in New York City. And her work focused a lot on the topics like gender roles, intimacy, and just sexual identity. And those are the topics I mainly focus on as well. And I think those are the topics that are less explored by Chinese artists because Chinese culture is pretty sexually oppressed. And so I don't often have artists from with the same background that I can look at and relate to. And so her work is especially inspiring for me. Yeah, and I like how open she is when, like, during like, how open she is when she talks about her work. When I watch her interviews.
I think there is that stigma, especially in a lot of Asian cultures, of like
Definitely.
talking about sexuality, let alone demonstrating it through artwork and like publicly, and visually. So I also agree. I really enjoy her work and how it kind of pushes that boundary and stigma against Asian women displaying any sort of sexuality.
Yeah. I'm not sure if her work is allowed to exhibit in China.
Really?
Yeah, I'm not sure. But
Yeah.
I haven't checked, but like, it's rarely to see
Yeah.
this type of work in Chinese galleries.
Yeah.
But I like how like she's so public and she voices her opinions. I think it's really inspiring for the younger generations who's like me, like studying abroad, and looking up to her to see like you're not alone if you experience like difficulty relating to other artists.
I think that's like the power of like having like each of us having an artist that we look up to because we can relate to them so much.
Yeah.
Because being from a marginalized community, it's hard to find your people
Yeah.
and to find the people who get you, because it's just so complex living in like this society where a lot of people can't relate to you or you can't really find your people. And it's important to find your people, your artists who you look up to, who get you, who understand you, and who want to show the world also like our identities and our community. Because it's like sometimes it's really hard to find those people.
I find it, I don't know about you, but I find it really difficult to try and find like artists that actually look at what I'm looking at, or like when I've tried to look at Indian photographers, it's a lot of street photography. It's not really necessarily like more conceptual, if that makes sense. It's more just like going out and just taking photos,
Yeah.
if that makes any sense. I just feel like all the photos, they're really good photos, don't get me wrong, but they all look like the same. It all just depicts India in the exact same way of like
Yeah.
poverty and all of that, and it's like India is not like that. It's so much more rich in culture and
The
stuff.
people
And
too.
yeah,
People are beyond just that.
they're not sad people.
Yeah.
They're all really happy. But I feel like in like the Western media, you only ever see like Asian cultures depicted as like struggling or just I don't know if it's the same for you guys or
No,
if it's different in New York or something.
for sure.
But
Yeah.
it's the same. It's like that in London.
Yeah, I can definitely understand what you're talking about. Another thing is that I noticed for China, like the photographers are not like well resourced. Like there are not much support that the society gave them. I think one is because like in the arts history in China, like they don't really focus on like visual arts or like photography. Like they focus a lot on traditional like paintings, like Chinese paintings and stuff. So I feel like there are not a lot of platforms for Chinese photographers to really like show their work and voice their opinions.
Yeah, it's a lot of control in terms of like what like is controlled by general or Western media in what is shown, and I think there needs to be a little bit more of like a broader
Yeah,
spectrum.
or even just in like education. Like, I don't know how it's been, if it's any different in New York or anything, but like whenever we've looked at art history, it's always European art history. It's very rarely ever any other kind of culture.
Yeah,
If that makes sense. It's like, from what I can remember, we've only ever looked at like painters that have been from like Eastern Europe or wherever, or like French. I can't think of any now, but I don't know if it's different. Is it
no,
different
it's
in New
not.
York, or
It's
is it
like
the same?
we have specifically we have a class in New York where we kind of go through famous photographers like throughout the years. Specifically, I think more modern ones like 20th century to 21st century, and they're all white.
Yeah.
They're all mostly men. Very little women of color. I think there's probably mostly Black women, if there are women of color, and then there's like one, I think, Iranian artist, woman artist, on this list that we were supposed to learn and supposed to like memorize, like the most famous photographers. And it's like classes and like things like that where like our history is completely skewed for us in terms of education, that like makes us feel so alone in like relating to anything and seeing ourselves present, because all we get to see in terms of like the famous photographers, the famous artists, are all white people, and it's like, okay, well that completely negates us and seeing ourselves in this work.
Yeah, and I even remember we had a class, we're in the same class together. We had a class where the teacher covered Chinese history or like Chinese photography, and the photographs are made by like Americans or like British, like like white people. So it's pretty hilarious to see to learn Chinese history by like someone who's not Chinese.
Yes, that's gonna be a weird class.
It's I think what's important in kind of this move to have our work represented and have our cultures and identities represented is to be represented by people who actually get it, and not like told our stories by white people continuously. Like I think specifically with like my history, when I've been learning about like Filipino American history, especially, is the history of colonization and how much that has influenced art and the people and everything about the culture. And it's really nowadays a push to move past our history being told by the colonizers and by the white people, because it's like that's all there is. If you look back at like an archive of Filipino history, it's a lot of just like our history being told and being photographed by people who have controlled the country, and not by artists themselves or people themselves.
Controlled the media, so it shows you what they thought it was like, not what it actually was.
And I think that's what we're pushing to do through our work, is to add to that new representation.
Yeah, I think representation is a big thing, I think, for all of us. Because I think with this project that I was looking at, it was a lot to do with like misconceptions around Indian women, and how I think when because I also took photos of like other half Indian girls that I knew, and we kind of just had to sit down, had a bit of a conversation about like what they thought, like people thought of them when you kind of say like you're Indian or something like that. And I guess a lot of people, we thought that they said that we kind of like quite quiet, or whenever you say like Indian culture, they always bring up the arranged marriage thing, which I always think is like, it's not as like, I don't know how to describe it, but it's not as strict as they think it is. Like we do get some choice, and if you think about it, a lot of the in Western culture, pretty much everyone used to have an arranged marriage anyway. It's just that we've kept it a lot longer, and it works, to be fair, because my grandparents on my Indian side were arranged, I'm pretty sure, and I think my uncle as well was arranged, and it seems to have worked, so it's not a bad think it's just
stigmatized.
Yeah.
In Western culture.
It looks like it's really bad, but it's not as bad as it as people make it out to be. I think
It's the stigma of
Yeah.
like different people, especially in Western culture, not understanding a culture that's different than theirs. And it won't change unless people in the community get to break past like being hidden away and erased from like mainstream
Yeah.
media and whatever.
Yeah, and I think especially if you're making photographs based on your assumptions, then like if they before they even
Yeah.
take the photos,
prejudice.
they
have like
they already have an assumption of
yeah.
it.
Prejudice. Yeah.
Yeah, and the photo that's gonna come out is what they think it is. It's not what it actually is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just not reality.
Yeah. I think like similarly to like your series, if you want to talk a bit more about it, I think I see like a similarity between your guys' series and trying to like push past unknown or stigmatized things about personal identities and our personal cultures, which I really appreciate in like both of your works.
Yeah, I mean, I know mine's got white girls in it, but that was kind of
The
just,
idea.
Yeah, it was kind of just to contradict. And then like in the other photos, I had a few of myself as well. And then I also had like the other half Indian girls, and those photos were like in black and white, and then these ones were in color just to kind of like show the difference. And I had like the white girls kind of acting more as a stereotypical like Indian girl, and then the Indian people like having like beer and drinking and like trying to be a bit more like the Western culture. Yeah, that makes sense.
No, it does, and I think
Yeah.
it like really speaks to your personal identity being from two different, like knowing two different cultures and identifying with two different cultures, because you're not just Indian, you're more than that. And like that is a really great way, like the project is a really good way to visualize that, to show these two groups and like them in it and them in like different
Comparison.
yeah. I think I like also the way that you utilize clothing. I think I've also tried to like use clothing to kind of
I
depict
think clothing is like a big thing because it's so different.
in different cultures.
Yeah.
It varies.
Even in just Asia, it's like even in just India, like there's so many different dresses or different styles of how to dress. And then like how you talk about like the colonization of the Philippines, it's the same in India. Like the British kind of like changed the way Indian women dress. Like they never used to have to wear like the blouse or anything underneath. You could literally just like have the sari and use the sari and the fabric from the sari just to like kind of like just drape over you. And a lot of like younger women are like now realizing that's how we should dress, and they're kind of like tailoring how they dress so it is like that, and it looks really cool. And it's kind of sad that it changed because the British were like, you're showing too much skin.
It's the Western stigma. The Western stigma that's completely changed an entire
Yeah.
culture. Which I feel like your work also talks about stigma as well, in terms of like what honestly women of color
Yeah.
have to how they have to be shown.
I feel like my work is not only about like push back the stigma that the Western has put on women of color. It's also like the oppression my culture is giving me, and I don't feel like I can express myself authentically when I'm like back home, and I just feel like so judged and like so criticized, and yeah, I just don't want to feel like that, and I just want to do whatever I want to, like whatever I want to make, like in terms of photography.
Yeah. I think you're definitely showing that
Yeah.
through your work, because it pushes, like as you said, like beyond what is allowed to be photographed by and of a woman of color.
Yeah.
Because I think especially it's a whole different story, because not only are we people of color, but we're women of color, and there's a whole other like addition to that in terms of like unpacking a lot of oppression, unpacking a lot of stigma towards us, because
even within our own cultures, there's still just because we're women, there's still an extra layer of it compared to if we were like a guy.
Yeah.
And like I value authenticity a lot in my work, because I feel like if you conform to a stigma or whatever the society expects you to do, you're not gonna the art you make is not gonna be authentic, like artistically authentic. And I don't believe good art should be like fake, like not from the bottom of your heart.
Authenticity
Yeah.
is how you really like show good work.
Yeah. I think sometimes for me, I don't know if it's the same for you, but sometimes just like the simple things I think can show so much more than if you were to have like so much in the photograph, if that makes sense.
It speaks more.
Yeah, sometimes just like a plain photograph, like that is still quite simple, and it's still, I feel like, but it shows a lot because it's not like overpowered with like, I don't know, it's like crazy editing, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I think it's in simple images like that. And then also in mine, I have like the flowers in it I use as symbols.
Yeah.
So like having little things in there to symbolize.
It's more I think it's more impactful and powerful in what you're trying to like convey.
Than just overcrowding.
Yeah, because like in this one it's still quite a simple image, but because she has the stereo thingy, and then in the other one she has like a old 1950s Hoover, like just having that one object makes it so much different to than if she was just standing there without the object.
Yeah. I think it really does speak to how we think as artists in terms of what we want to include to really convey our message and our story, because there is a lot that we want to talk about through our work. And I think our own identities really push that and really like influence our work. Like looking at our work now, it very much is like evident that we have a story to tell about who we are. And we want to like add to this whole kind of narrative that hasn't been really talked about much in terms of like mainstream art world.